Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the most important recording projects ever. And yes, here's one that you all immediately chimed in with. I was so proud of you all, frankly, because you knew it was coming. Of course, it's Antal Dorati's Haydn Symphony Cycle. Now, let us be clear about a couple things. This is still the best Haydn Symphony Cycle out, hands down, absolutely without question. And I've listened to all of them and compared them all. Okay, look, not all of it is perfect. Of course not, especially when you get to the Paris and London symphonies, where there are amazing performances by other Haydn specialist conductors like Harnoncourt and Bernstein and people like that. But Franz Bruggen, for example. And then there's the whole period instrument thing. I get it. I really get it. But the reality of it is this. There is no way that anyone is going to be completely consistent throughout 107 works, plus maybe overtures and other things if you want to do them. And not even that. You know, Haydn's range, we forget. Because he's Haydn, he's supposed to be jolly and nice and pleasant. Haydn's range is so much wider than just about any other composer who ever lived. And I don't mean just emotionally, but compositionally, in terms of technique. You know, the great Haydn scholar H.C. Robbins Landon said that the distance that Haydn traveled over his rather long career, from the first symphony to the last symphony, is a wider distance than virtually any other composer in history. And I mean including Wagner, and I mean the atonal people who started out late romantics and then did other wacky things. I mean, compositionally, because not only was it just an enormous gulf, but the language of music traversed was one that he invented. He was making it up as he went along, which makes it even more extraordinary. And given the range and depth of his genius, do you honestly think that any one interpreter is going to be able to encompass it all ideally from one work to the next? I mean, it's an impossible task. The question is, how close do they come? How good are they? Now, I understand also this was not, technically speaking, the first Haydn Symphony Cycle complete. There were some attempts before, and there was the Merzendorfer one that people talk about periodically, which is, frankly, doesn't come close to this in terms of overall achievement. Yes, it has its good moments, but most of it is rather scruffily played and somewhat indifferently recorded. And this is the one. This is also the one, let's face it, that was done right originally. It appeared in multiple volumes, separate volumes of, I think they were 3 discs each or 6 discs each or something. I don't remember even. But they had beautiful booklets with liner notes by H.C. Robbins Landon, the same notes that were eventually incorporated into his books on Haydn, Haydn and the whole documentary study of Haydn that he did with his analysis of all the works in the back. And those were the notes that they used. Really an extraordinarily carefully done, classily done project. It was also politically correct for its day. The Philharmonia Ungarica was, refugees from 1956 Hungary, and Dorati was really instrumental in finding projects for them to keep them going, to literally keep them alive after they left after the Hungarian Revolution. That's not a musical quantity. I mean, if the music making sucked, it wouldn't make any difference, would it? But it's nice to know all the same. It's an added fillip that's worth knowing in terms of historical background. Now, do I need to tell you why this is one of the most important projects? I mean, I remember reading analyses of Haydn symphonies by Tovey. Remember the great British musicologist and critic and program note writer, Donald Francis Tovey. And he was talking about, he wrote an essay called Haydn the Unknowable or Haydn the Unknown or something like that. With the fact, he basically said, it makes me crazy that the most important chapter in the whole history of Western music, that is, how one man brought to perfection the art that was, according to Tovey, of course, taken to even greater heights by Mozart and Beethoven and Brahms and those people later, how that process was impossible to follow. Why? Because there was no edition of the complete Haydn symphonies. They hadn't been published. There were no scores. This is in the 1930s and 40s. And finally, in the 1950s, we got our Haydn symphony editions by Robbins Landon and even later by the Haydn people more recently, the Haydn Stiftung, whatever they're called, that did the Haydn stuff. It really was incredible that nobody could even get a picture of what this guy achieved. And so in the 1970s, right, these were in the 1970s, weren't they, for the most part? I think so, anyway. When all of these were recorded for the first time in series with scholarly notes, we could finally follow the evolution of the classical style by the guy who evoluted it. And what could be more important or valuable than that? And if you are following the Haydn Symphony Crusade, which I hope you're doing, you will already understand just what an unbelievable genius this guy is, because every single work has something fascinating about it. There is no literal repetition in the entire series, none whatsoever. Haydn almost never repeats himself. It's just unbelievably amazing what he achieved. But we never would have known had not this project got going and had Antal Dorati, who was a conductor, unlike Merzendorf, whatever his name was, a conductor of some reputation, who could put his name to this project, who had the curiosity, who had thank God that man was there, because these works needed a conductor who had the cachet to put them before the public and say, wait a minute, if I think this is worth doing, you should think it's worth listening to. Now, granted, Dorati wasn't the biggest name in the firmament, but he was awfully well known. And Decca, to their credit, stood by him and did it. And then he went on and did the operas, which some of you also think should be another series. I'm not so sure about that. I think we'll have to consider that later. But for the moment, this was a milestone, and it still is, because it has withstood the test of time amazingly well as a series. People will have their favorites for individual works. I understand that. I support that. I have my favorites. These are not my favorite London symphonies, not by a mile. But it's all very solid, very well done, very consistent, all things considered, and really just a world of discovery and amazing music. There is no other series, frankly, that was as important and valuable as this one. Others may be equally so, but this is certainly first among equals. It remains so, and I insist that should be that should be the case. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.